Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Throughout the year, many of us build up permanent walls around ourselves. Narratives we tell ourselves, things we refuse to share, maybe some people we refuse to speak to. We all have secrets that we keep close to our chest, and pieces of ourselves that we're afraid to let through. For me, whenever something goes wrong, I tend to build up walls by rationalizing and contextualizing, saying, basically no matter what, everything is fine, I'm fine, it's not a big deal, let's just move on. I decide character traits about myself ahead of time. I'm calm, I'm always happy, I don't get angry, I'm an eternal optimist, and I refuse most emotions that don't fit within that narrative. Maybe some of you can relate to this feeling. Maybe you've built up a script about yourself or a narrative that's so unbreakable and so strong that something messy or real or vulnerable sometimes just feels like a little too much to bring in. You just have to get through another day of work. You have to get through another day of school. You have another AP exam coming up. You have an application due. You'll deal with all that later. Next time, maybe next month, maybe next year. If we're being realistic, probably never. But by design, as we head into Rosh Hashanah, and as we had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Judaism asked us to begin to chip away at those walls and those narratives. Together, we repented, we cried, we sang. We all said together, I am really flawed, and I've made huge mistakes this year, and so have you, and so have all of us. And we just let so many layers go. And I remember a noticeable feeling in my own body at the end of Yom Kippur, like a genuine weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I could start anew and stay that vulnerable and that real and that raw forever. And the rest of the year would just always feel like that, because how could it not? It was just beautiful. But then, of course, we had Sunday, the day after Yom Kippur, and suddenly Monday rolls around. Suddenly I'm back at school at Columbia and JTS, and it's midterm season. And I'd let all these layers go, but suddenly I'm back to the narratives I'd been telling myself, and I'm back to the rushing. I'm back to sending texts while I'm walking between classes, not really noticing where I'm going, probably running into a pole, and not really seeing whether the sun is shining. And I'm back to getting places so quickly. I'm sure many of you know New York pace. Maybe in Minnesota it's a bit slower, but in New York we're always walking quickly, rarely taking a moment to see each other, to say hello, to notice what's really going on in our lives. We're getting lost in the things that keep us walled in these ideas of permanence and power that we think we can hold on to. But just as we're physically returning to our permanent walls and structures and obligations, in that exact moment, it's a custom to start building our sukkah. Our sukkah is a dwelling with temporary walls and a roof that's open to the sky so we can see the stars, so we can get rained on, so we can feel the cold of October. It commemorates the shelter of the Israelites during 40 years in the wilderness. We decorate the sukkah with symbols of the fall, with squash and gourds and fruits and pomegranates and leaves. and we're invited to dwell in this space for 7 days during the holiday of Sukkot, which started last Wednesday. And we invite guests and strangers into the sukkah for meals and conversation and prayer. Sukkot invites us to leave our comfortable homes. It's an open space. It's a flimsy structure exposed to the elements with no real roof, no real protection from the elements. And it's a refuge. It's a place of love and hope and joy that we build for ourselves and our communities. We bring our entire selves into the sukkah, unable to avoid the complete vulnerability of our situation, unable to build up permanent walls, and really with nowhere to hide. And throughout Sukkot, we read a text called Kohelet, also known as Ecclesiastes. And I see this text as a scathing rebuke to our permanent walls and our false assurances of our own security and our own grandeur. In this text, we recognize our weariness, our tiredness, and our fears. In Ecclesiastes 3, we read a passage. It says, "There's a set season for everything under heaven. It preordains a time to be born, a time to die, a time for planting, a time for being uprooted, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to keep and a time to throw away." The list goes on and on, all of these left and right, holding many things at once. But I find this piece a bit unnerving, to say the least, and maybe you do too. What is it that God has preordained in each season? This is your time to live, and for some of you, it's your time to cry and your time to mourn, and for some of you, it's been decided it's your season of laughing, and for some of you, your fate is sadness and tears. It's really easy to read this text and just kind of wilt away and resign to our fate. We might as well give up if we have no control. But really, I think Ecclesiastes is a text about showing up for each other in all of those times, in the vulnerability of our sukkahs, seeing our liturgy during this time of year as a container of comfort. It's a fact that each of us will experience these cycles throughout our lives. We will all at different points laugh and cry and dance and mourn. That's probably the most guaranteed truth there is. The question of Sukkot and of Ecclesiastes is not avoiding that pain, but acknowledging it and letting each other sit in that sukkah of vulnerability and bringing guests and strangers into that sukkah of vulnerability. I think Sukkot and the sukkah represent that space Ecclesiastes is talking about. It's that space in between that's temporary and unstable and not permanent. And then even after Sukkot ends next week, we'll take down our temporary structures representing this beautiful vulnerability that we're still trying to hold on to after Yom Kippur. But maybe there's a way going forward that we can build these vulnerable sukkahs again within ourselves and within our communities throughout the year. What would it mean to really be there for friends, for their tears and their laughter? What would it mean to be there for your own planting and your own being uprooted? For mourning and for dancing? What would it mean to really show up when it's scary and it's awkward and it's messy and there's no rules and no answers? What would it mean to show an emotion that goes against the narrative that you've decided for yourself? I think this could be our other way after Sukkot. And I want to close by sharing a story and a message of one friend who taught me how to build vulnerable sukkahs of care amidst the busyness and chaos of life in New York City. His name was Yakov Shapiro. Yakov was a beloved leader in the Columbia Jewish community. He passed away suddenly the day before Rosh Hashanah. And I feel like I've been carrying the weight of that loss since that day. And I want to share a piece of his legacy tonight to teach us what it means to truly keep our tents and our sukkahs open, no matter the day or the time. Yakov was someone who always stopped what he was doing to greet people when they walked into a room. It didn't matter if he was busy or what he was doing. He always looked every person in the eye, and he said, "How are you? How are you?" Or like Yakov, it was like, "How are you? How are you?" He had this amazing spirit and personality that just brought light into the world. And the last time I saw Yakov, the Thursday before Rosh Hashanah, I ran into him when he was with 5 friends on the Upper West Side, and I was with 8 friends heading to a birthday party. As soon as Yakov recognized us on the corner of probably 85th and Columbus, he stopped what he was doing, he left his friends for a second, and he went up to each one of us and said, "How are you?" And he gave each of us a huge hug. And on that street corner on the Upper West Side, we felt like diamonds. We felt like it was so important that we were there, and Yakov knew we were there. And in reality, Yakov, I'm sure, had somewhere else to be. I'm sure he was late for his show. I'm sure his friends were waiting for him. But for Yakov, that didn't matter. What mattered was building that vulnerable moment of pause to make sure each one of us knew that we were seen and that we mattered. To really embrace the meaning of Sukkot this year, to embrace our vulnerability and our realness, I invite us to honor Yaakov's memory by building a practice of taking moments of pause to let people know we're there for them, that we see them and that we honor them. In that small moment of pause, we break walls down and we let someone in. We stop what we're doing. We put down our phones. We know that text can wait. We know that our TikTok scrolling definitely can wait. We know that that email can wait. And we actually look up for a second. And we look someone in the eye and we say, "I see you, and I'm here for you. And whatever you're holding, we're holding that together." Like Ecclesiastes says, in one moment, you'll be the one dancing and laughing and singing. And in the next moment, really so quickly, with one phone call or one piece of news, you'll be the one mourning or crying or weeping uncontrollably. Or maybe you're holding someone else as they're going through those cycles. We're all together working in these cycles, feeling these complexities at different times and in different seasons. We're turning and turning through all of this. And this year, we can build open structures to do that turning with love and with care. In that small moment, when we stop and we pause and we say, "How are you?" Maybe say it to the person next to you. we could lovingly take this moment. We take this moment, and maybe we can call it a Yakov moment, where we share a brief pause to build spaces of love, connection, and hope amidst all the chaos and the busyness going on around us. And we create that space and that container and that sukkah for vulnerability to let us bring our whole bodies and our whole selves to laugh and cry and to weep and to mourn through every season. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.